Hello, my name is Eva Howley and this is my presentation for Project 1. This observational study will illustrate the psychological experience of the Grange Library and surrounding park. Throughout my presentation, I will be discussing the observation of human behaviour and the relationship to their surroundings through the lens of certain theories relating to the location. It is crucial that designers and observers understand the impact of environmental psychology and the way humans interact with specific surroundings. These observations refer to Kurt-Lewin's equation. The equation states that behaviour is a function of the person, the environment, and the interaction between the two is referred to as a person-in-context approach to understanding behaviour. This theory is largely dependent that human behaviour is affected by the psychosocial, psychological, and existential interaction with the observed environment. Despite this theory being vital to the observation, the presentation will aim to use other theories to discuss the overall perception of the setting. The selected location is Lanham Park and Library, which is situated on the corner of Lanham Avenue and Sealham Street. The setting was chosen due to the significance of the Wilston and Kedrenbrook and Grange community and the typology of the surrounding residential area. The presentation will follow the outdoor seating in the deck of the Grange Library and the park that extends to Sealham Street. Firstly, we will be discussing the time and conditions that the observations took place in. I conducted my studies over 3 one-hour sessions over 1 weekday and 2 weekends. I deemed these visits as the best way to conduct my observation with my schedule and the schedule of the users of the setting. I situated myself in a small corner of the outdoor seating area which had a great overview into how the setting was used or not used without interrupting the participants. The first observation was on a Saturday morning at 11:15 a.m. It was 16 degrees and had a slight drizzle. This first observation allowed me to analyse the potential of the outdoor undercover seating of the library. This first session allowed me to see the potential users of the library, and it was clear that the younger generations found it more comfortable to go out into the rain than the older generations. The next observation was on a Friday afternoon at 4:15 p.m. It was 20 degrees and had a slight cool breeze, as the sun was starting to set. This time allowed for a large range of demographic users and further observations. The final visit was a Saturday at 12 p.m. It was 24 degrees and the sun was shining. This then allowed for further observations of the use of the park during its busiest time. Zeisel's physical traces theory is vital in understanding how the space is perceived by the user. Traces of erosion and leftovers give the observer insight into how the space is used and how often. Erosions are clear through the images of the worn playground equipment and the grass erosion from the shade of the tree. Leftovers are clear through the images of rubbish and personal belongings that have been left throughout the site. Furthermore, props, separations, and public messaging give the observer indication as to how the setting could be used in the future and the connectedness of the community. Props are shown through the bike racks and the undercover seating area, which gives perception as to what activities the park is utilised for. There is a clear separation from the two playgrounds in relation to the ground surfaces and the equipment available at each. There was minimal public messaging with one official COVID sign that is clearly more than 4 months old, and one unofficial sign that a user has placed in the park. James J. Gibson's affordance theory was identified through the observation of human behaviour. Affordance theory focuses on the relationship between objects and the functional or possible uses. Through the theory, accessibility and wayfinding were key factors that were observed. The majority of the users access the park via the ample street parking that surrounds the park or the library car park, even if they weren't using the library. There were bike racks available for those not travelling by car, and dog walking tracks surrounding. There are abundant walking paths surrounding the inside of the park. These paths lead to certain areas of the park surrounding bikeways like Kedrenbrook Bikeway. It is noted that the surrounding pathways mapping the outskirts of the park were not used or frequented by the user. Rather, they used the pathways within the park to cut across. Despite the lack of signage and indication of connectedness to surrounding bikeways and parks, the users seemed to find direction and knew where they were heading. The next theory that was discovered through the observations was Brunswick's probabilistic functionalism. Probabilistic functionalism focuses on the distal and proximal cues of certain environment. The most important cues affect the perceiver's function of a space. The distal cues are the number of trees, the color of the ground, the number of people, the colors, and the amount of litter. The proximal cues are glare, undisturbedness, comfortability, pollution, and crowdedness of the space. I chose these distal and proximal cues as they were best in gaining a better understanding of the sensory and perceptual aspects of the space. These cues correlate by allowing for better understanding of the setting and its functional use. An example of this is on a visit it was raining, so the park was not used to its full potential and was harder to observe than the sunnier days. There were varying personality types that were observed within the park. It was noticed that the more introverted user tended to use the seating at the back of the park closer to the road, or the corner of the library seating that was secluded or separate from others. For instance, individual caregivers or parents had remained to themselves and secluded themselves away from other parents or caregivers. In contrast to this, more sociable and extroverted users tend to use the more open spaces of the park and were in conversations with one another. For example, 2 groups of mothers were observed standing having loud animated conversations out in the open areas of the park, whereas one mother was seen waiting for her children at the back of the park away from the groups of other parents. Through Cassidy's 1979 study, the interaction of privacy, territoriality, and crowding was observed at the setting. It was noticed that despite the seating that was available, participants preferred to stand or sit on the grass areas. The private undercover seating was not utilized due to its clear lack of cleanliness and overall appeal. The children were observed utilizing the more updated and newer playground in small groups, generally playing where their mothers were standing. I noticed small groups of parents having loud public conversations despite the possibility of more privacy. The playground was designed for clear visibility from all locations of the park, with its central place outside the library seating. Through the observations, examples of territoriality were clear through the examples shown. Leaving items such as bags, hats, glasses, and coffee cups are all indications of territoriality and is known as marking of temporary personal territory. These items were seen as an example of an extension of oneself and were clear to the users of the space. Another example of this is when a family set up a gazebo, table, and chairs for a large gathering, which they have claimed a large area of the park as theirs for the time that they were in the park, which made it clear to other users that their personal space had increased. Crowding is a subjective experience but allows for better understanding of psychosocial behavior due to the suburban area surrounding the park being densely populated. And the small size of the park, it created more opportunity for crowding. Through the observations, it was clear that crowding had occurred in several areas of the park. On one day, crowding was evident due to the high number of participants at the park. Small gatherings of mothers and their children, clearly with the social and personal space of one another, engaging in socialization. Another instance of crowding was evident through the observation of 2 separate children's birthday parties. One had chosen to set up a gazebo with a large group of adults surrounding this gazebo. Through these observations, design recommendations could be implemented to improve this psychosocial and psychological experience of the Grange Park and surrounding setting. The first recommendation is to upgrade the older playground that had clear signs of erosion and tiredness. It could be upgraded by adding more of an updated and range of equipment for better usage and more connectedness to the other playground that is used frequently. Within these upgrades, the seating areas that are available very clearly need a revamping as they do not get used in a way that is effective for their purpose. A seating area that is closer to the playground that allows for better parental supervision so that parents don't have to stand would also create more connectedness to the playground. A second recommendation